Alright, so I'm going to show you today what I would consider to be a typical use case for this Square Triangle app. This is for anybody doing any type of roof. This is production, this is custom, this is anybody that's doing a roof where you may be using trusses. And oftentimes the trusses, when you have some type of a cottage roof, the hips will be built into the structure of the truss. So then these ones are going to be flat tops. These ones are going to be all the way to a peak. Your ridge goes here, your hip goes here, and you need to fill in the blanks here with some hip blocks. Okay, so your hip blocks are going to look like this, right? And then a lot of people will double cheat the ends. So from a top view, it looks like this. So whether you actually double cheat or you go one way, it's kind of personal preference, but this is the type of block I'm talking about. So a lot of people have difficulty with this calculation. For whatever reason, it doesn't seem to click with people, but this is why I made this tool, is to aid with this type of thing. So the first step that we need to do when we're calculating this is understand what's the length of the hip on the flat plane. Okay, so if you're looking at a top-down view, this is going to be 22.5 between trusses, and so when you're calculating for the hip, I usually take off a 1/16 either side for the gang plate. So that'll be 22 3/8. And so it's 22 3/8 both ways because we're talking about a square here. All right. So we go into our handy calculator app, and you can see I've already done the calculation ahead of time. But so you've got 22 3/8 squared plus 22 3/8 squared, and the square root of that whole thing is going to give us the value that we're looking for, which is 31.64. So that's this line here. If you were going to just do it on the flat, that's on the horizontal. Okay, so this is 33.64. So we take this value, copy, bring it into the other app, the Square Triangle app, and we want to set the pitch as being 17 because we're doing a 612 roof, and the hip, the value that we use for the hip is going to be the 17 of whatever 12 it is that you're calculating, as I explained in a previous video. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then look at my previous videos. Alright, so this value is going to be 33 9/16. So this, when we're looking at the thing like this, that's 33 9/16 from here to here. And this is on your hip blocks. So I've even given you the degrees that you need to set the saw to. So if you're using like a miter saw or something like that, you can set it to that. And obviously if you're using a speed square, you just use the 6/17 or the 6 hip on the hip scale of the speed square. Or if you're using regular square, it's 6 and 17, and you should already know how to use that. So 19.44, which probably just rounded to 20 or something like that. Yeah, so that's from point to point. So if you're double cheating, you're that's from this point to this point. Or if you're only cutting them one way, then that's from this point to this point. So we need to figure out how many of these we need. So we're going to just count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, and then twice that, 10, twice that again. For this side, you're going to have 20 in total. So we need 20 of these. So the way that you want to do this in this app is you go to your history and you can look at any of the recent calculations that you've done. So you add it onto the cut list by going on the plus sign, and you look at the cut list, and I added too many. Okay, and I want to say that I want 20 of these. So when I send this to the guy that's going to cut them later on, he understands that that's what I want. So by default, the app is going to give me the slope and the plumb cut because that's the most typical use case. But maybe I want the seed cut for a different type of cut, or maybe I want one of these other values that you can optionally click tick the box so that you can send those values instead of the slope cut. So now we need to figure out how many common blocks we're going to need. So we can go around the truss plan and count how many common blocks. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we're going to have 8, 9, 10. Times 2 is going to be 20 again. So we know we need 20 common blocks. And this one is an easier calculation because we don't have to calculate the hypotenuse to go down the diagonal. So just put in the 612, which is the regular pitch, and all right, so that's 25 and an eighth, and because we said that we just need to add it to the cut list now, and I said I want 20 of these. So now I have my whole cut list because this is a really simple roof. You can continue to add things here if you want. You can also expand and contract these so it's easier to view things. So you copy everything to your clipboard and then take it to whatever app that you want to use to send, or if you want to just like paste it in a note for later. And then you can send it to your cut guy or whatever. So okay, so this is if you have just like a regular sort of flat top truss like this, but oftentimes you'll see the trusses with the little horns on top, and then the flat top section is actually dropped. And this is still a use case where I think I personally prefer to still cut hip blocks, because when you have these horns, a lot of guys are trying to accommodate it by getting the hip as close as possible, but the horn is in the way, and the way that the 2x4 on the flat is interacting, it's still very difficult to get the hip properly supported. So I still prefer to just calculate them and cut them and put them in place, because I think it's a better job. Also, it spaces them correctly, and you can still use common blocks for the purposes of spacing, and then run your 2x4 on the flat over top of them. So if you know what I'm talking about with these trusses that have the horns, then you can understand what I'm saying. If you've never encountered these trusses, then you can just ignore this part. But if I have drop trusses like this, I still use common blocks for spacing the trusses, and I still use the cut hips for actually placing the hips, because it does a better job of supporting both sides of the sheeting. Okay, so one more thing this is a pro tip I'll leave with you, is that when you have your column blocks like this, it's a good idea to mark down how much, so that your truss is going to be like this, right? How much is it above the here where it's going to plane out to here? You need to, it's very useful to know how much of a drop you've got between the top of your truss and where the column block has to sit, because it has to sit higher in order to plane to the other side. So most people just use like the bottom of a nail gun or a speed square or pencil or whatever to just plane it out, which is fine, but it is a bit of a pain to try to do that when you're trying to straddle trusses, etc. So what I like, okay, so measure down from the short point of your common and put a mark here or a nail or something like that, and then rest it on the truss, and it makes your life a lot easier. So then you can just rest it there, rest it on the one up top, and it makes your life easier. So rest it here, nail up top, and it'll be way faster. Make your life easier. So this calculator also makes it super easy to make that calculation. So down here you just say this is 1.5 inches, and your upright value is going to be 3/4. So on a 612, you want to measure down 3/4 of an inch, put a 2-inch nail at 3/4 of an inch, and then you rest that on the flat top and nail it in place. All right, so this is how to use the Square Triangle app, and happy framing.